Hello, everyone. This is Christina Barr, and you're watching Black Tea News. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Black Tea News. I'm your host, Christina Barr, and today we're going to be talking about this piece that Abigail Shrier wrote. And if you're not familiar with Abigail Shrier, she is the author of Irreversible Damage, and which is a book about the craze, the phenomenon of the transgender movement, and how it has had a profound effect on a lot of young women and really become a fad that women who would maybe normally have different maybe psychological, emotional sort of issues with depression, and maybe they'd be cut or maybe they'd be bulimic or whatnot, instead of like gravitating towards those sort of things, or gravitating towards being transgender. And parents have she didn't really want to write the story at first. Actually, people came up to her and was like, hey, my daughter is caught up in this, and would you please look at this? I've gone to other journalists, and she tried to pass it off to some other people and they weren't interested, so she decided to write about it, to tell the story, simply because it's true. She's not like an anti-trans activist or anything like that. She just wanted to tell a true story. So she was maligned for it. Amazon, she had wars with people who didn't want to like have her book available, been called a transphobe, and a bunch of other things. And though I think her book is pretty profound and her work is really important, she doesn't really come off that way at all. She just simply wanted to state the truth. So she did a speech, I guess, at Princeton, and she shared it, I suppose. And so I wanted to share it with you guys because I think it's a pretty profound piece, and it hits on what I was talking about yesterday and what I talk about often, but why I find it important to do what I do here every day and online, and write articles, and on TikTok and on Facebook and on YouTube, Instagram, everywhere. I find it important to talk about what I believe, because there's people who are trying to push back against reality. There's so many normal people out there who just want to live their lives and they don't want to rock the boat, but 62% of Americans are afraid to even voice their genuine, real opinions. And then I'll voice my genuine, real opinions, and people are like, you're a token, just stop healing and pandering. I'm like, but there's more people out there who are spouting things that I don't believe. And if I really just wanted some sort of seal clapping, I would just go along with the elite power structure. But instead, I try to stand up for what I believe is right, no matter if I'm maligned, no matter if I'm talked about, no matter if people talk about my weight or my gap or whatever. I'm going to keep speaking the truth. And I think there's my opinion and there's the truth. There's some things that are objectively true, and we live in a world where people are trying to convince you otherwise, that nothing is objective, that everything is subjective, and that our history is up for grabs. That's actually what critical race theory is about. It's not about true history. It's about subjective history based off of like kind of cultural experiences and with a complete political goal in mind. And that's actually like within like the literature of critical race theory. So that's the goal when people mention things like that. So I'm not one of those people who are scared to speak up. I'm glad that I've gotten comments from you guys, that you guys have now been inspired to have conversations. And someone left a comment yesterday and they said, I've been inspired to speak out more. And even though they thought it hasn't even been as scary as they thought it would be. They just try to be respectful, and people have received it well, and some people don't, but that's just life. We're not going to convince everybody. Not everyone's going to receive you, but you go ahead and you speak the truth regardless, because if people don't know, I don't know, a lot of people are scared. And if they don't know that there's someone out there like them, then they themselves will just allow themselves to be the silent majority. And then the silent majority will get weeded out until there's nothing left in them. So I think this piece by Abigail is really important, really profound, and it touches on a lot of what I was talking about yesterday and why I do what I do. So I want to share that with you guys, and also talk about a couple other things. Man, California is like going to hell in a handbasket. They are preparing themselves to be a sanctuary city for abortion, not just supporting abortion, but like subsidizing it, basically supporting it. So to the point where they will like pay for your hotel if you travel out of state to go get an abortion if Roe v. Wade is overturned. So this is really evil. Um extraordinarily evil. There's so many things up with that state, and this is where they want to, I don't know, this is what's going to be their new tourism attraction. I guess it can't be beautiful beaches and all that other kind of stuff with a high crime and homeless crisis just over flooding the streets and whatnot. Man, and then also in Michigan, we you guys are aware that there was a tragic shooting in Oxford, and so now of course there's political pouncing, and Democrats had a press conference about how they want to ban the sales of ammunition. So I'm not surprised that that is coming. That's just what people tend to do in situations like that's, always trying to make a move. I don't know how much they'll really push it or succeed, because people do want to take advantage of a crisis and people's heightened emotions. But people at the end of the day, they do believe in their constitutional rights, and people are buying more guns because of the high rises in crime. Now, it's been more of a phenomenon across the country. In Michigan, we didn't really have, there were like BLM stuff that tried to break out, but they did not let that stuff go down like they did in other parts of the state. And honestly, one of the candidates who's running for governor, Chief Craig, he's one of those people who shut that down. So there's that. But I don't think there's a is a good play. Maybe they feel this is their opportune moment. I don't think it'll be a good political play in the end. So we'll see where it actually goes. Um, but maybe they're trying to garner some very emotional support from people while wounds are still very fresh. Maybe they see this as a way as pushing back against Republicans, because they have a lot of just terrible things to run on. Biden is no help to them. Um, I but I don't see it in the long run being a good move for them. So we'll revisit that and touch back on that in a little bit. Before we jump into stories of the day, I do want to encourage you guys to go to blacktnews.com, check out different content that I have on the website. Make sure that you're sharing different articles that I wrote. Like yesterday, I dropped my piece on abortion and why do you feel it's a harm to society. People say it's my body, it's my choice, when it's not really true, because one, I mean, the man had to be involved, right? You didn't just poof the baby into existence, right? And then there's the baby itself, and then it involves a lot of our taxpayer dollars too, right? Like organizations like Planned Parenthood do get taxpayer dollars, funds. Um, People are trying to remove the Hyde Amendment so funds can directly go toward that. And then our government has actually purchased fetal body parts. So it involves a lot more people than what you think. But even besides that, um, the fact that we allow, and even at this point in time, promoting it, the fact that we produce a society like this, if they're willing to do this to little children, what sort of things is our government and our society willing to do to you? So I can answer those questions in the piece. It's kind of like one of my longer ones, but it's well worth the read. So please share that around. Please check that out on blacktnews.com. If you like what I do here, please consider supporting Black Tea News. You can go to blacktnews.com/donate, leave a donation, and also check out different merchandise that we have on the website. Here's a couple things on the site. Got lots of cool stuff you guys can check out. I love the "You Are Not That Special" mugs, and also got the pumpkin spice season mugs. You guys can get that. Also got them in cute little shirts as well. So you guys can check some of that stuff on the website as well. So I do have something funny today. It's kind of funny and tragic, but the clapback is funny, at least from Greg Gutfeld. So Fox News, they had a big Christmas tree. It was an artificial tree, and someone lit it on fire. No kidding. Someone actually lit the tree on fire, and that person was actually released because of bail reform, I guess. He got they didn't hold him, so the person who lit the arsonist, it was let go back on the streets. That's what the New York Post reported. So anyway, this was like, I guess, the damage done. for the tree. And Stephen Colbert tweeted out that the flaming Christmas tree just got its own show on Fox News. And Greg Gutfeld clapped back and said, and it's already beating you in the ratings. How funny. So if you are unaware, Fox News is just killing everybody, like in the ratings, as far as like late night stuff with Greg Gutfeld show. I mean, they beat CNN and MSNBC and all those other guys. Now, people are usually like, yay, the right is winning. They also march to a tune of a certain beat as well. FYI, Fox does. But there's still a lot more of the other guys that make up, and they still hold a lot of institutions of power as well, with print media, though that's dying. But they do have, articles they put online. There's big tech is on their side. So I wouldn't be doing any happy winning dances as of late, or just quite yet, I guess. But Greg Gutfeld's late night shows, they do get more ratings than the big guys that you see on, like Colbert and so on. So it's really interesting because I do watch Greg's show. I watch it more when it's just on Saturdays, and I guess because it comes on, I think, every night now. And I really like his monologues. I can't say that Greg has made me like laugh out loud like a lot. But I enjoy their commentary on their show with Kat and is it Ty, the big guy, and the guests that they have on. I enjoy their commentary. It's usually like a different perspective on stuff, maybe stuff that no one else would put like a particular kind of way. So I enjoy their show. I don't know how many people are just like busting a gut, but I don't know how many people sit and watch Jimmy Fallon and just crack up either. I mean, sometimes they have funny skits, but I feel like comedy is dying in a lot of certain ways because people have allowed themselves to be so angry and blinded with politics. And if you're going to imitate people, like in the case of like SNL, their Trumps were so bad because I think they hated him too much. And they adored someone like Alec Baldwin, and Alec Baldwin didn't really do a good job with the Trumps. There's so many people like on TikTok and other places do way better Trumps. I've seen so many way better Trumps than what they done on like SNL. And then they couldn't do Biden correctly, like when Jim Carrey came on, because I don't think they protected him. They loved him too much to write really good jokes about him. So there's people online like who do way better parodies than SNL can. But when you're just so blinded by ideology, I think it starts affecting your humor. So I mean, whose line is it anyway? I really love that show back in the day, and then I watched it like there's a particular comedian. I think his name is Greg, too. But when he has glasses, blonde hair, and he just hates Trump, and they'll tell jokes like Americans in the South are racist, and then they'll expect people to laugh. I'm like, that's just a statement. That's not a joke. It's not a joke. It's just a statement. And they're like, yeah, I did something there. It's like, can you like think of a punchline when you're assembling this stuff together? And then I've seen it affect other people as well. So so I don't know. Greg just is still out there trying to be himself, and Stephen Colbert and Fallon and Jimmy Kimmel, for example, they're just so into their ideology that them and their writers can't think straight, I guess. So congratulations to Greg for continuously beating these folks. But that is crazy about them just releasing this guy with no bail. There's so many people are getting back on the streets to commit more heinous crimes, some of them very, very violent. He did a lot of property damage with art. I mean, it's arson. Who just lets an arsonist back on the street? And he also has a rap sheet as well. So it's not like this was just a random person who's just decided to wake up and commit crime one day. It's someone who It doesn't. So that is the world that we are living in right now. So let me get to this piece with Abigail Shrier. And again, I'm reading this because I think it's important for people to hear her perspective, and it really aligns with my perspective. And I want to encourage other people to not be afraid to be maligned, to be hated, to just, that stuff's going to come. People are going to dislike you if you are pushing against their agenda that they have been planning for a very long time, for decades. And maybe people are just sort of waking up to it, but it's been a very long, knitted together conspiracy, I guess you could say. And they're not going to just take it lying down when people are pushing back against them. So you're going to face opposition, but for speaking the truth. But I think it is important for people to stand up for what is right. And right before I talk about Abigail, I do want to thank Brighter Michigan PAC for allowing me to be in the studio. Again, if I say something today that triggers you, they don't care, I don't care. It doesn't work like that. I'm just using the space, and I'm very grateful to the space. Brighter Michigan PAC, check them out. They're good peoples. They're good peoples. So Abigail Shrier, again, she wrote this book, Irreversible Damage, and she just became hated for writing it. And I think it's an important book. I think it's an important topic. And she just recently went to Princeton and she gave a speech. So I'm going to read a bit of her speech to you guys. It's going to be kind of long, but I think it's kind of important. It's really important. And you can listen as opposed to reading it yourself. So there's that. Okay. The question I get most often, the thing that most interviewers want to know, even when they're pretending to care about more high minded things, is what is it like to be so hated? I can only assume that's what some of you rubbernecks want to know as well. What's it like to be on a GLAD blacklist? What's it like to have the top ACLU lawyers come out in favor of banning your book? What's it like to have prestigious institutions disavow you as an alum? What's it like to lose the favor of the fancy people who once claimed you as their own? So perhaps I'll begin by telling you a little bit about myself, mainly because I'm not so different from many of you. I grew up daughter of two Maryland state's judges in a multiracial suburb in Prince George's County, Maryland. I attended a community Jewish day school, which I loved. In high school, I worked as a stringer for the Washington Jewish Week and edited my school paper. I attended Columbia University, where I received the Kellett Fellowship for 2 years of a graduate study at Oxford. From there, I earned my JD from Yale Law School and then clerked for Clinton appointee on the DC Circuit. At the beginning of my clerkship, I accepted a setup with a guy from Los Angeles at the end of the year and had decided to follow my then boyfriend to California. I took a job with a terribly prestigious LA law firm whose daily tasks nearly antithesized me. I married my boyfriend, struggled to hold on to pregnancies, quit law firm life, and had 3 children. I taught them to read and sang them songs very badly and wrote a series of unpublished novels. To most people who'd known me before wondered what the heck I was doing. I began writing a few op-eds for our local Jewish paper, one of which was spotted by a Wall Street Journal editor who invited me to submit to the Wall Street Journal. I did, and in the course of that year published 13 op-eds with the journal. One of those op-eds inspired a reader to contact me and tell me the story of her teen daughter who was rushing into a sudden gender transition. After trying and failing to find an investigative journalist who wanted the assignment, I took it on myself. My investigations turned into a book called Irreversible Damage. Now, I just want to stop. I, so she has this prestigious sort of left wing sort of, your idea of what a left wing sort of person is. Can you imagine being a parent and you're desperate and your child isn't a certain way? Some people are like, you got to just let people slide. Some people know. Like a friend of, well, an associate of mine, their child decided that they were trans, and they knew their child was not trans, but they knew if they reacted a certain way, their kid was stubborn and they would double down. So they're like, okay, well, we're poor, so we're not buying you hormones, but it's your hair. You can dress how you want and you can do whatever to your hair. So she cut her hair and started dressing different for a little while. And then she got over the fat. She got over it and was like, you know what, I am a girl. And phased out of it. And this is a person who's like more left wing. And if her child was trans, I'm sure they probably would have gone along, and respected and loved them. But she knew that her daughter was not trans. So can you imagine being in that position, that your child, the child that you raised, that you sang to, that you named, and they're going this route, going to permanently alter who they are. I didn't realize how heartbreaking this was until someone wrote an op-ed piece, I think it was in the Washington Post, about how their child cut them off because I guess it was too much of a reminder of the life that they decided to leave behind in their trans identity. And I thought it was so heartbreaking. I covered it on the show. And there were so many people on Twitter who thought the mother who was telling this heartbreaking story, they're like, well, her love wasn't unconditional because she wouldn't love her daughter now that she changed into a man. And I'm like, what are you talking about? She's heartbroken because because she loves her child. And it's amazing how people will just let their ideology totally just shift their brains. So I can't imagine being in the state. And then they kept going to journalists and journalists and journalists. And she was the one who decided to take up the cause. So she had a particular prestigious sort of background, and she decided to just go ahead and tell this story. She tried to get other people to do it and they wouldn't do it. So she decided to do it. And she was been maligned and hated so much ever since then for simply telling the truth. So I just want to interject there. I'll go back to the story. All of which is to say, I'm not a provocateur. I don't get a rush from making people angry. You don't have to be a troll to find yourself in the center of controversy. You need only to be two things: effective and unwilling to back down. Why am I unwilling to back down? Why wouldn't I prostrate myself before the petulant mobs who insist that my standard journalistic investigation into a medical mystery, specifically why so many teen girls were suddenly identifying as transgender and clamoring to alter their bodies, makes me a hater? Why on earth would I have chosen to write this book in the first place? And am I glad that I wrote it? If you're here, you no doubt are familiar with at least some of the unpleasantness you encounter whenever you deviate from the approved script. So, again, what's it like to be the target of so much hate? It's freeing. That's what I'd like to talk to you about. As an undergraduate studying philosophy, spent an inordinate amount of time wondering whether my will was free. This is the metaphysical question of whether anyone can be said to have acted freely. And most of the philosophers seem to agree that our will wasn't all that free. The hard determinist painted a world in which every human action was ultimately explicable by the wave of function of elementary particles, ultimately leading neurons to fire, setting off an axial conduction well beyond our control and none of which we directed. Even if you weren't a hard determinist, you struggled with the obvious problem that human decisions and the reasons behind them are structured by one's upbringing, experience, or even inborn personality traits, all of which shape our motivations. Compatibilists claimed that at most one could hope to live according to one's own motives and preferences, that is, motives and preferences that were largely determined by things like personality. The actions of man are never free, the 18th century determinist Baron Holbeck once wrote. They are always the necessary consequence of his temperament, of received ideas, and of the notions, either true or false, which he has formed to himself of happiness, of his opinions, strengthened by example, by education, and by daily experience. I remember reading those lines as an undergraduate, tugged by the worry that Holbeck was right. Maybe our motivations were determined by our personalities and upbringing and received ideas. Today, I read them and think, if only. In 2021, it seems a luxury to worry that a will determined and shaped entirely by received ideas, and our own personality driven desires might not be entirely free. Today, before any of us decides what it is we want, we open our phones and participate in our own manipulation at the hands of those who actively want us to think and see and vote differently than our own wills would have us to do. We were not entirely free before. In other words, we are far less so now. I think that's true. Like, I have so many conversations with people about the 2020 election, and I remember sitting at I was at one of those dinners that were like stop. It wasn't like a stop the steal thing, but it was like an election integrity event. So people were asking me like what do I think is like the most important thing or what happened or whatever. And I said, you know what? I know everyone's talking about voter integrity and stuff like that, but I think the real biggest problem is the media and if we don't do something to pierce this information gap, then we can put every single measure in place possible and we'll lose every single election if we do not find some kind of way to bridge the information gap, because they have Hollywood, they have the mainstream media, they have big tech, they have the government, they're in control of the government right now. They have all these levers of power, and they know that if they can just continue to pump out as many numbers as possible, that it's likely that they'll win because they can control the hearts and the minds of people through what they make people consume. And if you're a different sort of voice, they will come in and they'll try to cut you at the knee. Someone asked, was I when I post a video on Facebook and stuff, am I like monetize and stuff? I'm like, they don't want to monetize my stuff. So again, if you want to support Black Teen News, go to blackteennews.com/donate. But they do things with algorithms and stuff, try to X out as many right-wing people as possible. And then they get mad for people who are successful. And then they try to do hit pieces. There was a hit piece the other day about how the right wing is making their own bubble. And they complained about how many people were downloading big people like, I don't know, Ben Shapiro and other stuff like that. And they'll do hit pieces on like Tim Pool, who's not even like right wing, but anyone or Joe Rogan, which she mentions Joe Rogan in her article in a little bit, because people at Spotify tried to boycott him when they made a deal with Joe Rogan. And they resent the fact that these people are finding ways to break through to the audience, regardless of, their appeal, their power. People hated Rush Limbaugh. So many people hated Rush Limbaugh. God rest his soul, the great one. People hated him not just because of what he said. They hated him because he was effective. She already said it. People hate you if you're effective and you're unwilling to back down. And that described Rush. And there was a monopoly on information. And he basically built up right-wing radio. Well, actually AM radio, period. That was pretty much a dead art form. And he made it a thing. His influence on the culture and in the political conversation was astronomical. That's really why people hated him. And when he died, so many people said terrible things. And people were so terrible. And during that time, I don't think I was really doing my shows, dailies and stuff back then, but I put up videos here and there. But so people were talking about how racist he was. And I would say Bo Snerdley didn't think he was racist. And he's like, who's Bo Snerdley? And I'm like, you know what? If you want to talk about Rush and you don't even know who Bo Snerdley is, you don't know anything about this man. Because Bo was his call screener. He's with him like every day. They had a very close relationship. And he was a Black guy. Now, I know to some people, if you have a Black friend, if you hire someone, if you're close to Black people, that doesn't necessarily not make you racist. Okay, that's their logic. But if you don't even know enough about this man to know who is behind a show, something such as a close, intimate detail. So people hated him because they were told to hate him, and the media hated him. People in power who were on the left hated him. Even some people on the right but hated him too. But you can't go against Rush because he had a lot of influence and power. Because there's not There's some people out there who on the right, well, no, they're Republicans, but they're not very on the right. They're not very conservative. And people like Rush and people who Rush would support and elevate, and even the audience members of Rush kind of embarrassed them. So they couldn't speak out too much, but he was a force. He was a force. It was my dream. I've said this before. It was my dream for Rush Limbaugh to one day on a show say, why do liberals hate Super Kid? And Super Kid's here it is. It's my book that I wrote based off some crazy stories about my dad. It's available if you guys want to get that for your kids. And some of you have gotten it, and I appreciate that, but that was part of my dream. Because I just thought that would be great commentary. Just to turn on the radio one day and get all this hate knowing that you're doing something right and rush to comment on it. But people don't want the right to have any sort of influence. So that's a really big issue. That's a really big problem. And so she's speaking to that, and I speak to that, and I think it's a really big issue. Let's go on. Every dating app pushes us toward the same few attractive mate choices. Spotify presses us to like the same music. Amazon pushes us to purchase specific books away from others. If you're under the impression that books Amazon recommends to you are based solely on content-neutral algorithm, I can disabuse you from that fiction now. I once asked one of my sources at Amazon, who was concerned about the ways the search results were being manipulated, whether he'd seen a book deliberately boosted. Yes, he said, Becoming by Michelle Obama. Isn't that crazy? Isn't that crazy? This woman was the first lady of the United States of America. Her husband is Barack Obama, who's an extraordinarily popular president. There were so many people who hated Barack Obama's policies and wouldn't vote for him, but still said, well, I like him. I think they just said that out of pressure, though. I don't like him. I'm not ashamed to say it. And I don't care for her much either. But the fact that she comes out with a book and Amazon still felt the need to boost it unnecessarily. Well, they had the money to pay for it to be boosted. And I'm not saying they didn't, but she's saying that her source in Amazon said that they were purposely boosting Michelle Obama's book. Amazon didn't need to do that. But that's what they wanted to boost. Isn't that crazy? It's crazy, but you guys could believe it, I'm sure. You guys can believe it, I'm sure. It's just a shame. When that book came out, he told me virtually every search you did led to recommendation to buy for the former First Lady's book. You know what? I I do remember seeing her book a lot in like recommendations and stuff. It was just everywhere when it came out. But the funny thing though, when her book came out, a little bit after that, I came out with my book, Slay Your Fear. And I remember searching through the different topics because my book got number one in, or maybe I don't know if it got number one. It was really high. I can't remember in like in a particular category. I like screenshot it somewhere, so I don't remember, but it got high in a category. So you can break down Amazon. You can be like on the main page, but you can also get high on different sort of categories. So I don't know why. I don't know why this was a thing, but Becoming Michelle was like high in the LGBT issues, and I was so tickled. And because there's so many jokes, and the jokes are so disrespectful about her being a lady or not, and of course she is, but why was her book labeled in the LGBT category? So I think I screenshot it. I can't remember if I did, but I'm like, and I was like, should I post this joke or not? But it just tickled me so silly. It tickled me so silly that she was Becoming Michelle was in the LGBT category. Like, what are you guys trying to say about Michelle? That her book is in this? Anyway, The opposite is also true. There are books that are never recommended by Amazon algorithm, irrespective of how well they've sold or how likely a specific shopper is to buy them. Or at least there's one such book. I'll let you try to guess what it is. Obviously, she's talking about her own book, Irreversible Damage. But the larger point is your will is being toyed with, subverted, manipulated, and in a fairly insidious manner. None of you will be shocked to hear that Google promotes certain search results in order to lead us to a certain perspective. But did you know that for contested entries, Wikipedia assigns editors, some of whom are who ideologically committed activists, many of whom have very particular views they want you to walk away with. If you form views based on those Wikipedia articles or reports by corrupt fact checkers, if you act based on them, you exercising freedom or free will? Given that you've been spun and prodded along the predetermined conclusion by hidden persuaders, perhaps you aren't. Perhaps you're left in the same sorry state as more evidence toyed with, subverted, manipulated, acting out someone else's plan pointed in the direction that he wants you to walk. We've spent a lot of time in the past few years debating whether this kind of manipulation is at the root of our political divisions, but I don't think we've paid enough attention to an even more basic question: how it has interfered with freedom of conscience and ultimately free will. When polled, nearly 2 out of 3 Americans, 62%, say they are afraid to express an unpopular opinion. That doesn't sound like a free people in a free country. We are each day forced fed falsehoods we are all expected to take seriously on pain of forfeiting esteem and professional opportunity. Some men have periods and get pregnant. Hard work and objectivity are hallmarks of whiteness. Only a child knows her true gender. Trans women don't have an unfair advantage when playing girls' sports. On that final example of a lie, the one about trans women and girls' sports, I want you to think of a moment about a young woman here at Princeton. She's a magnificent athlete named Ellie Marquette, an All American swimmer who set an Ivy League record in a 500-meter freestyle event as a freshman. Just before Thanksgiving, Ellie was defeated in the 500-meter, the event she held a record in by almost 14 seconds, by a 22-year-old biological male at Penn who was competing on the men's team as recently as November of 2019. That male athlete now holds multiple U.S. records in women's swimming, erasing the hard work of so many of our best female athletes and making a mockery of the rights of women fought for generations to achieve. And we talked about that a little bit on the show. This is the person right here. This is the man who just beat that record at Princeton University. Well, at Penn. So at Penn State. So that's who she's talking about. The guy who was competing as a man and then decided he's a woman, and now he's just trashing all the women's records all around the place. And people are bullied into just accepting this, into believing this, saying, changing our language. We have people in Congress who won't say women have babies. We have to say pregnant people, or people with periods. That's what my governor said when she repealed the pink tax, the 6% sales tax off of tampons and so on. She couldn't even say women. She had to say people with periods, as if there's someone else who can have it. J.K. Rowling has been maligned for just acknowledging biological reality. This is a person who taught many children about acceptance and friendships and so on, and people hate her. One of the actors, HBO is doing this big special about Harry Potter. They're going to have old video clips of J.K. Rowling, but they're not going to include her. And people assume it's because the left just finds her so toxic. And one of the actors who was in Harry Potter, like a smaller role or whatever, just let it be known that they were happy and thankful to J.K. Rowling, and that Harry Potter was her first film, like big film, and people came for her for thanking J.K. Rowling. So people are willing to take you out if you do not accept their reality that they're building. If you push back against it, they will push back against you. And it's pretty bizarre. It's pretty bizarre. Ellie Marquette sang her heart out for Princeton. When will Princeton fight for her? Where are the student protests to say enough is enough? When a biological male who has enjoyed his full benefits of male puberty, larger cardiovascular system, 40% more upper body muscle mass, more fast twitch muscle fiber, more oxygenated blood, decides after 3 seasons on a men's team to compete as a woman and smashes their records of the top female swimmers in the country, that is not valor, that's vandalism. Where is the outrage? Imagine for a second that it must be what it must be like to be a female swimmer at Princeton, knowing you must pretend that this is fair, that the NCAA competition is anything other than a joke. Imagine being told to bite your tongue as a man, as men lecture you that you just need to swim harder. Be grateful for your silver medals, ladies, and maybe work harder next time is the message. Imagine what that level of repression does to warp the soul. I agree. Now imagine instead the women swimmers all had walked out. Imagine they had stood together and said, "We will meet any competitor head on, but we will not grant this travesty the honor of our participation. We did not spend our childhoods setting our alarm clocks at 4 a.m. every morning, training for hours before and after school to lend our good names to this fixed fight." I know why students keep their heads down. They are hoping for that Goldman and New York Times internship, which they don't want to put in jeopardy. Well, any institution that takes our brightest, most capable young people, Princeton graduates, and tells you you can only work here if you think like we tell you and to keep your mouth shut, that isn't really Goldman Sachs. And it isn't the paper of record. It's the husk of a once great institution and is not worth grasping for. Talk to alums at these institutions. They sound like those living under communist regimes. And that's the America that awaits you if you will not speak up. You who are studying at one of the greatest academic institutions in the country, only to be told that after graduation you must think as we tell you and recite from this script, why were you born? What's the point of being alive? Computers are vastly better at number crunching. They'll soon be better at all kinds of more complex tasks. Why they cannot do is stand on principle. What a computer cannot do is refuse to lend credibility to a rigged competition, to refuse to strengthen its coercion, making it that much harder for the next female athlete to speak up. What the computer cannot know is the glorious exertion of the human when it refuses to truckle in the face of lies and instead publicly speaks the truth. I didn't write irreversible damage to be provocative. In a freer world, nothing in my book would have created controversy. I wrote the book because I knew it was truthful and I believed recording what I found that there was a social contagion leading many teenage girls to irreversible damage was the right thing to do. I also believe if I hadn't written it, thousands more girls would be caught up in an identity movement that was not organic to them, but would nonetheless lead them to profound self harm. But I didn't write it specifically to stop them. I wrote it simply because it was true. So that's another interesting thing. She didn't make all this stuff to be some person leading on the right to take down the trans move or anything like that. She's just a journalist reporting a story. And I think it's an important story. I think she's doing the Lord's work right here with this book. These interviews, still continuously speaking out, being brave, not backing down. But she's just standing up for what she believes is objective truth. When I testified in front of the Senate Judiciary Committee back in March, I started by stating that I am proud to live in an America where gay and transgender Americans live with less stigma and fear than at any point in American history. That is the glory of freedom as well, the chance for adults to live in authentic lives and guide their own destinies. And allowing mature adults to make those sorts of choices for themselves is absolutely a requirement of a free society. Yes, you can reject the false dogmatic insistences of gender ideology and still wish to see transgender Americans prosper and flourish and fulfill their dreams in America. I do. I wrote the book because the story of one mom and her teen daughter compelled me. And so did that of dozens of other parents who then spoke to me, mothers and fathers who sobbed as they described how their daughters had become caught up in a craze that seemed completely inauthentic to the child, but which they were powerless to arrest. I wrote the book not because I believed the fancy institutions I attended would celebrate me or even acknowledge me after I had done so. I wrote it because I knew that the point of all of the educational opportunities I received that my equally qualified grandmothers never had, the purpose of all the sacrifices my parents had made for my education, for all the time my teachers and professors had taken with me, couldn't be to plod through life on a forced march. The point of all the hours my parents and teachers and mentors had devoted to me was surely not to become the world's best oiled automation. The point of that privilege, and yes, I think that was kind of privilege, was to be able to write and think as others lacked the will to do so. Spotify employees tried to hold that company hostage because they carried my podcast episode with Joe Rogan. Amazon employees threatened to quit if they continued to carry my book. GoFundMe shut down a grassroots fundraiser by parents who reached into their own pockets to advertise my book, and the ACLU threw its entire century-old mission in the garbage, all because of one book with which it disagreed. Joining these petulant mobs is not a show of strength, and it is not freedom. It's closer to servitude. True, if you dare to exercise your will, you may sit for decades on the Supreme Court as the eldest member, the only African American, perform your duties admirably and with integrity, and perhaps not a single elementary school in America will bear your name. Does anyone doubt this is a discredit to his distractors, not to Justice Thomas? I cannot claim to know if we are truly free in the metaphysical sense, but if the universe is anything less than thoroughly determined down to the last subatomic particle, then we must also agree that freedom admits of degrees. And if that is true, then we are far less free today in this decade that you, as undergrads, have lost a significant measure of freedom that your parents once had. Take it back. Take it back. It's yours to demand. Take back the right to speak your mind thoughtfully, courageously, with a goal in mind behind giving offense. I mean, beyond giving offense. I'm sorry. The list of unmentionable truths expands so rapidly without reason other than the attempt to suffocate a free people so that they forget the exhilaration of a lungful of air. If you are someone who believes you have pronouns or would like to supply them, by all means, that is your prerogative. Whenever anyone asks me to use their preferred pronouns, I can do so without confusing my audience or muddying an argument. I do so, and I think this is an important courtesy. But when asked, I will not state my pronouns. And if you don't believe in gender ideology, you shouldn't either. When you state your pronouns, you participate in the gender ideology, the belief that there are in uh, in the belief that there are genders unknowable to all but the subject, that no one can possibly know I am a woman unless I've supplied these. I do not believe this. I regard this as nonsense. When asked for my pronouns, I say I am a woman. Take back your freedom, reclaim it now. Psychiatrists and pediatricians tell me they are afraid to resist an adolescent's demand that she be given puberty blockers because they're afraid. That's another thing that's just up the wall too, that people will believe that they are transgender and they will go to because usually people would have all these years of therapy or whatever to confirm this stuff. But nowadays people go to a doctor, and I guess I'm not going to say everybody, but a lot of people go to doctors, and doctors will work with the assumption of the self-diagnosis, and people are getting this stuff very, very fast, radically changing their lives very, very fast. Now, most people who have gender dysphoria grow out of it naturally, but there's such a social component to this now that people are convinced. And I talked about how 60 Minutes did a segment how there was a woman who decided that she was transgender, had her breasts chopped off, took hormones, and then decided that she had made a mistake and then detransitioned all within the span of a year. And she's not alone. There's a lot of people who have done this and decided that they made a mistake, that they were lied to, that someone should have stopped them. But we have a culture, even if you detransition, there's quite a few, there's people that I follow that I've seen their videos on TikTok and YouTube and other places, that they've detransitioned and they got more hate after they decided to detransition than when they ever decided that they were going to be trans, because people who say that they are trans, they feel like they're being invalidated, and they don't want to give like credence to people who are against them, and I understand that. But there are people out there who are genuinely confused. It's a gender dysphoria. People get mad when you call it some kind of mental condition. You do have to go to therapy and usually get diagnosed for this kind of stuff. But there are people who are self-diagnosing, and people don't really want to help them. They're so devoted to an ideology that just keep pushing and pushing and pushing, and it's just hurting a lot of people. If they point out the risk of hastiness of the decision, they will lose their licenses. Parents tell me they are afraid to push back on the activist teachers and social workers at their kids' school for fear of being called some flavor of phobe. Whatever freedom is, this isn't that. And all the wonderful education you have earned here will have been wasted if you find yourself one day observing some malfeasance occurring or lie predominating in your own field, and the best you can do is sit on the phone with me anonymously, lamenting the state of things. You will soon be graduates of Princeton. Show some self respect and reclaim your freedom. It isn't in those moments when you do just what's expected that your will is tested. It isn't in those moments when you recite the script that you exceed what any computer can achieve. Those moments when you manage to make yourself a faceless member of a pre-approved course will slide away as though you were never part of them. You will, each of you, have the chance to matter. You will find yourselves at hospitals or in banks or in courtrooms, at newspapers, where you will see things that happen that you know to be wrong, where you find that the standard line is actually a lie. You may have found yourself there already. You're If you're fortunate enough, you may even find yourself one day with children of your own, knowing you are their best defense in this world, and you'll feel the numb of your will pressing you to do something, say something. And when that happens, don't sit there like a sock puppet. I'm 43, which I realize makes me very old to many of you, but not so long from now, you'll wake up and be 43 yourselves. And when I look back on my life thus far, it occurs to me that the decisions of which I am most proud, the ones that strike like an unexpected kiss, are not the times I obeyed the algorithm. There are the times when I defied it and felt for a moment the magic and power of being alive. When I felt, even for an instant, the exquisite joy of not being anyone's subject. When I had the unmistakable sense that I've existed for a purpose, that I stood for the chance of leaving the world better than I found it. You don't get any of that through a lockstep career achievement, and you certainly don't get that by being the left's star pupil. You feel that frisson when you choose a person to commit yourself, knowing full well that any marriage may fail, when you bring children to the world where there are no guarantees of their safety or success, when you summon the courage to fashion a life, something that will remain after you are gone, when you speak the truth publicly with care, and when you say to the world that you cannot buy me with flattery, purchase my colleagues or classmates at bulk rate. I am not for sale. So I thought that was a great article. I thought that was a great article, and a great speech that she gave at Princeton, and she was kind enough to share that. And when I read it, I'm like, that is so good, and it was so um, just in the pocket of what we've been talking about. She mentioned the article. I've mentioned it. 62% of Americans are afraid to voice their real opinions because of backlash. They don't want to rock the boat and whatnot. But we are programmed in so many ways to go along with grain. I see so many people saying, "I'm so mad y'all made me vote for Joe Biden." And like, how can someone make you do that? You're privately alone at the voting box. People were very intimidated to do what their friends with the TV, with celebrities, everyone was telling them that they were doing some kind of great harm and they'd be harassed, like other people who were harassed for 4 years. Like, you voted for Trump, you're a terrible, terrible person. It's like, oh, you decided not to vote, you voted third party. Like, people would terribly harass if you didn't just toe their line. I was watching TV one night before the election, and we were watching Vampire in Brooklyn with Eddie Murphy on Bounce TV. It's like a local, urban channel. And there was an ad that came on it that said, people can see if you voted. Make sure that you vote or something like that. And how it was structured, it was really, really creepy. And then they played basically the same ad again. And then they played an ad for Biden. And then they played an ad for Gary Peters. He was running for Senate at the time. And then they came back and played the ad again. And then they played that other ad that was basically the same ad. And so when the ad was over, it felt like it was threatening me, So you can't look up and see people's how they voted. But if you just watch that commercial and you don't know that, I think that was an easy assumption. So if you're getting, and people got mailers from like that said similar things. So if you got people telling you have to do it, and then you got ads saying people will know if you didn't do it, and people ready to harass you, Biden saying that you're not black anymore if you don't vote for him. There were so many different pressures from so many different people, and they had celebrities up the wazoo. I can't believe The Rock got involved and said they were voting for Kamala and Joe. And I was really disappointed. And I was disappointed. He said, I cried some manly tears. I'm like, ugh, so unsexy. So unsexy, Rock. And they used to be my boo back in the day. Only reason why I really watched wrestling with my brother. And it was The Rock. I'm not gonna lie. It wasn't the entertainment. It was The Rock. It was The Rock. But I've grown now out of such things. I was disappointed because he's really really about his business, and he's also very savvy, also very smart. And I just was like, why get involved with politics? But he probably thought that he was convinced, someone convinced him that it was that important, so he went ahead and he did it. And there was so much pressure, and now people feel like y'all made me do it, and people have regrets, and people are like, why is gas so high? I hate this. So it's important to speak out and make people feel like they are actually not alone, and it is okay to think for themselves. It's okay if they actually don't want to vote. I feel like if you're not informed, then and you don't have any desire for that, just, I don't know, leave it to the adults. Leave it to the adults then. Leave it to the adults. I think that people are like, you got to do it, you got to do it, you got to do it. But where's it is a responsibility to go out and vote, but it is also a responsibility to be informed when you're doing it. And there's in the left really, really, really pressures people to get the bulk of the numbers and to get the outcome they want, but they don't pressure their constituents to be knowledgeable. As a matter of fact, they bank on them not being knowledgeable. So they're out there really trying to control your will, control your decisions. And I think Abigail summed it up nicely, that they're really things that are objectively true, they're trying to just totally twist around and get you to just live and accept and just shut up. I think it's important, like, she said in her piece that she would respect people's gender pronouns. I won't do that because I'm like, men and women are different. Sex and gender are intertwined. If they weren't intertwined, then you wouldn't have had the surgery. Like, you would be taking hormones. You internally know that. You're just trying to get me to change my perspective on reality. If it was just about what you think, you wouldn't need me. You wouldn't need me to bow down to reaffirm your life. I'm a stranger. Why do you care? But I'm not about to just twist my world. I'm not about to lie for you. I'm not about to lie for anyone. That's me. That's where I stand. And I did a video. I've talked about this, and you guys can go watch it on YouTube and Facebook and so on. But Ben Shapiro did a debunking of transgender ideology, and Sam Lux, who is a trans woman, did a debunk of his debunk, which was terrible in my opinion. So I debunked his video debunking Ben's video, and people were mad at me. I stated at the beginning that I'm not going to use Sam's respected pronouns, that Sam is a man, and people keep commenting and were so mad that I do that. I'm like, I told you where I stood at the beginning. Don't have a bigoted opinion against me. You can at least respect where I'm coming from. I told you from jump why, and you cannot like it. That is your right, but don't expect me to just change my entire worldview and change my language for you. You know where I stand. You cannot like it, and I can respect that you don't like it, but I can't respect that you're trying to bully me into a different view. That's where I draw the line. So I hope you guys enjoyed that piece. It was kind of long. I know I stumbled on a few words and stuff, but it was a good piece. If you go to her Twitter page, Abigail Shrier's page, she tweeted it out, and I think I saw it in Ben Shapiro's feed. That's when I first saw it today, and I was like, this is such a good piece, and I had to share it with you guys. It was it just really speaks to the moment, and again, why I do what I do. I think it is important to speak out and let other people know that they are not alone. They are not the crazy people out in this world, but there are people trying to get you to shut up and go along with the agenda. And if you do not stand up and take back your country, take back objective truths, take back morality, you're going to just end up living in a communist sort of society. We're going to lose America. You know, we're going to lose our country if you're not brave enough to at least speak up against it. I'm not even asking you to take arms and do something. Other people had to take arms. I'm just asking you to stand up and speak. Open your mouth and be brave in that way. And you know what? Maybe someone will try to cancel you. John Schneider, who was Jonathan Kent on Smallville, he had a video. He's like, they can't cancel me. I quit. He's like, I left Hollywood. I'm doing my own thing. I got my own studio. I make my own stuff. He's like, I'm not even going to use their distribution stuff. It's not because they don't want it. I don't want to like entertain that monster or be tempted to take their money. So I'm going to do my own thing. You guys can buy a DVD. He's like, oh, maybe be a little expensive, but you can get it. And that's how you can support me, what I'm doing. But I'm doing my own thing. And there's other people building their own things. Tim Pool, I know, is building his own content. Daily Wire is building their own content, like movies and whatnot. And they're building their platform, which there was a woman on ESPN who wouldn't take the vaccine because she wanted to have children, and she just didn't want to take it, and so they ended up firing her. Daily Wire picked her up, and she's going to host some kind of new show. Adam Carolla's hosting some kind of show on there. They picked up Gina Carano after Star Wars Candor because she wouldn't bow to the gender pronoun ideology club. They gave different reasons why they fired her, but that was the reason why they wanted to let her go, and then they were just waiting for a reason. They maligned her and they lied on her. That's one of the reasons why. It's one of the reasons why. Many reasons. There's lots of reasons why I don't want to really support Disney, and I won't be. I'm not running the theaters to see Spider-Man or anything like that. But it's a lot. It's deeper than that. But we got to stand up some kind of way. And does it go as far as like just taking our ball and going and building our own sort of world? I don't know, maybe, but at the very least right now, you got to be brave enough to speak up and say something. Be brave enough to speak up and say something. At least that. Be brave enough to have a conversation with your neighbor and make them think. Make them break things down critically. Make them think it through. Different issues. And maybe you don't have all the answers. Keep researching, keep reading, keep having conversations. There's a scripture that iron sharpens iron. Well, you're not going to know how well you can defend your positions unless you can actually defend them. So don't be afraid to have conversations. There's some conversations I think aren't really worth having with people. There's some people not worth talking to. Like when people come out and tell me like, "Oh, you're a token, you're a sellout," or something like that, I'll maybe like highlight their comment or something on TikTok and just really to embarrass them, I guess. But once people think you're insincere and they're so blinded, they're just a waste of time. I just use them for content, I guess. I don't let it hurt my feelings. I know what I'm doing, why I'm doing what I'm doing. I know what I'm doing, why I'm doing what I'm doing. And I appreciate you guys being here and being on this journey. And I guess I briefly talked about um, the in Michigan they are trying to ban sales of ammunition in due to the Oxford shooting. I will have we're the hours late. That took longer going through that piece than I thought. I knew it would take a while, but I thought it was important. But they are taking advantage of this crisis. I don't know how it will turn out for the Democrats, but I believe we'll try to cover that more tomorrow. Um, in California, they're also going to. I mentioned that they're going to try to make it like a abortion sanctuary. We'll try to cover, I guess, a little bit, touch on some more on that tomorrow. I'm looking at what the news is, but we got to speak up. We got to speak up because I know they had their chance, I guess, to get rid of Newsom and put in Larry Elder and try to put California back on a positive route. But man, I don't want to say that that state is lost, but as I was listening, because Ben Shapiro talked about it a lot today, and that was like his focus of the show, California, how it's changed so much. Um, and I just kept thinking, and this is from a spiritual aspect, that they just need revival. They need people to go in and change hearts and minds. And I don't know how much like politically that people can just do it. Like people need like an overhaul mentally, top to bottom. And I as a I think politically that can discourage people, but at least as a Christian, I'm like, there's hope because there's Jesus, and that's all that they have in California is hope of Jesus because it's bad over there. It's so bad. It's so bad. It's so bad. Godspeed if anyone's listening from California. Godspeed. 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 Thank you guys for joining me today. I do want to encourage you to go blacktnews.com, check out different content that I have on the website. Please check out different merchandise that I have on the website as well, like the cool goat hoodie that I got. I got that in different colors. You can check that out. Got those in shirts as well. Check out the Denounce White Supremacy, Defeat Joe Biden shirt with a list of his racism on the back. And I also have I Am Not the Victim You're Looking For, given the topic of today and what we talked about. That would be a good shirt. And you know what? If someone asks you about it, you could just kind of let them know what it is. Actually, I made that shirt after Gina Carano's situation. And I did do, if you're unaware of it, I've talked about it quite a bit on the show, but I do have a video on YouTube that outlines, that details like the top 5 takeaways of that was like my first video that I think I posted on my Black Tea that got a good response anyway. So go ahead and check out that because they really, really did her wrong at Lucasfilm, did her wrong at Disney. But that's why I made this shirt. I am not the victim you're looking for. That was the inspiration behind it. And also check out different books that I've written as well. I mentioned my Slay Your Fear book that I wrote. It released last year after people were losing their minds. People are still scared. We have a new variant that ain't killing nobody. I keep hearing jokes that Alec Baldwin has killed more people than the new COVID variant, which is true. I can't believe I would not even be mentioning Alec Baldwin if he wasn't spinning like a web of lies, just a ridiculous deception about the gun. Which someone pointed out that in his interview he mentioned that they were filming then. So is there camera of what happened? Is there film of what happened? Was it caught on screen him shooting the woman? I don't know. But if it is, like there's obviously some footage there, right? Because they were working on it. Maybe they weren't rolling yet, but maybe they were. Maybe they were. But the sheriff, them investigating, thinks that that interview was dumb and his story is fishy, so fishy. But anyway, I have this book, Slay Your Fear. Go check it out. It's a nonfiction faith book. I do also have historical fiction fantasy books as well. I also have contemporary fantasy. I have paranormal romance, young adult, new adult. And some of you have told me that you've checked out Super Kid, that your kids have liked it. I appreciate you guys checking out my books. And if you want that information, if you go to blacktnews.com and go to the merchandise, there's a banner there that will lead you to Ninja Just Publishing. So you can find it all on blacktnews.com. Make sure you guys are following me on my social media platforms. All of the handles are at Black Tea News, except on Twitter. That one is at True Black Tea. God bless you guys, and I will